toil and snares. If I falter, Lord, who cares? Who with me my burden shares? None but thee, dear Lord, none but thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. When my feeble life is o'er, time for me will be no more. Guide me gently, safely o'er to thy kingdom shore, to thy shore. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing his mercy and his grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, he'll prepare for us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. While we walk the pilgrim pathway, clouds will overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow, not a sign. When we all get to heaven.
Verses 51 and 52 to begin this morning. Luke 2, verses 51 and 52. It says, "And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and continued in subjection to them. And his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus kept increasing in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men." There are very few verses in Scripture that describe the early life of Jesus. And Luke here doesn't spend time describing daily routines or methods of teaching or even very many details about their home in Nazareth. Instead, the Spirit gives us this very brief picture, simple wording, but full of meaning. And in these two verses, we have three things that are placed side by side: a son in subjection, a mother who treasures, and a life that grows and matures. The text doesn't stop to explain each detail of this, it simply presents these things. And because God chose to preserve these words, I think we should give careful thought to what is being shown to us in them. And so I want to take a moment to break these texts down a little bit and talk about and discuss things that we can know and understand from this text. Again, looking at verse 51, he went down with them and came to Nazareth and continued in subjection to them. And I think this statement should arrest our attention. The one being described here is not merely another child. This is the Son of God. just a little earlier in this chapter, a couple of verses earlier, in verse 49, did you not know that I had to be in my father's house? Is an exclamation that he gave to his mother. Even at this young age, he understood his unique relationship to the Father, and he asserted that relationship. But immediately after that declaration is recorded, the Spirit records he continued in subjection to them. Subjection is often misunderstood. People assume that to submit to another is to acknowledge that you are inferior to them. But this text destroys that assumption. I had a philosophy teacher in college. We got into a lot of strong discussions about this very topic because he insisted that if you were subject to another, that it meant that you were lesser. He insisted that in every relationship of life, and the biggest one that we had discussions about in that class was marriage. For a wife to be in subjection to her husband inherently meant that she was less valuable and less important and less capable, and he was just absolutely refused to accept that. And I argued as strongly as I could that it had nothing to do with that. I'm convinced that this is one of the most heinous lies that Satan has sown into this world and people have bought into. Jesus was not lesser than his parents in nature. Everything about the Gospel of Luke, everything about the New Testament, everything about the Bible asserts that he was something much greater, that he was the creator of all things, including man. That he came and dwelt among us, and that he accepted being born into this world as an infant that was reliant upon the people around him to keep him alive, and raised as a child that had to be in subjection to his parents, although he was creator of all things, just destroys the idea that subjection means lesser. It doesn't mean weaker. It doesn't mean less capable. It doesn't mean lower amount of knowledge or a worse judgment or any of those things. He was not deficient in worth at all. He was not lacking in dignity, nor was he lacking in glory. But he was in subjection to them. He willingly functioned within the order that was established by God, submitting himself to his parents. And the text says specifically that he continued in subjection. I find that word interesting because it means it was not momentary. It wasn't a one-off thing. He didn't just submit himself in those circumstances. It was an ongoing disposition within the home. And it apparently had been so before this, and it continued to be after this. He continued in subjection. That implies that before this, he had been in subjection, and after this, he remained in subjection. Scripture consistently presents the divine order as a good thing. It always presents disorder as something that destroys. Rebellion tears apart. But proper order allows for peace, allows for growth, and allows for stability to exist, which is why in 1 Corinthians 14, it says that church assemblies should be done decently and orderly so that all can be edified, so that all can grow, so that all can be at peace, so that all can have stability and develop greater faith and a greater and stronger relationship to God. Order is required. Order is required in our homes. Order is required in our nations. And there is a divine order for these things. And even Christ, who possessed all authority, lived within ordered relationships while on the earth. The one who possessed all authority is here described as living in subjection to his parents. And this means subjection cannot involve inferiority. And it tells us that obedience was not beneath him. Subjection did not lessen him. What it actually did was reflected his alignment with the will of God. And that's an important thing because the world treats submission and restraint or any role distinctions as if they erase value and discount people. The scripture doesn't do that. It presents proper order, not as an attack upon worth, but as a structure through which God accomplishes his purpose and full worth can be realized. The highest example of this truth is presented right here in the person of Jesus himself when it says that he continued in subjection to them. Second thing I want you to notice is also found in verse 51. The next phrase, his mother treasured all these things in her heart. This is a remarkable statement because Luke doesn't describe activity as much as he is describing discernment here on the part of his mother. Mary is described here not as speaking or teaching. She's not described as directing or controlling. In fact, she's not described as publicly acting in any way. Instead, she's treasuring. She's thinking, she's weighing, she's retaining, she's valuing things within herself. The text says she treasured these things. We ought not mistake the language here as being passive. Just because she's not out instructing or controlling or disciplining, or shouldn't mistake this as being passive. To treasure something means that you actively recognize its worth. It means that you hold on to it intentionally. It's not something that you remember by accident. It's something that you determine to remember. It's not something you value by accident. It's something you determine to value. It means you distinguish it from things that are common or things that don't have to be remembered. And notice carefully what she treasured. She treasured all these things: the sayings, the events, the implications of what God was at work doing. Mary wasn't merely watching events unfold around her. She wasn't just seeing the world unfold before her. She was processing the world. She was processing the things that she saw and that she heard and thinking about them carefully and deeply. And the text says she treasured them in her heart. It was internal work. People didn't see it. Crowds didn't applaud her for this. God saw it, and God saw fit to record it for us so that we would know, this characteristic, this aspect of what was going on. And this kind of treasuring requires a great amount of wisdom. The moment you talk about her treasuring these things in her heart, you're talking about someone who at a very young age already manifested a great measure of wisdom. To treasure rightly, a person has to realize what's worth keeping. And you make judgments about that. I didn't always do a good job when my teachers gave lectures at realizing what information was important and what information wasn't important. And that usually manifested itself in poor performance when test time came around. I had studied and learned the wrong things. It matters what we treasure and what we don't treasure, what we keep and what we don't keep, what we remember and what we don't remember. We have to distinguish between what matters and what doesn't matter, and that requires good judgment and understanding and discernment, all of which don't come naturally or automatically, maybe is a better way to express that. But they come to us through careful discipline and learning from the things that God has taught. Scripture consistently presents godly women as women of wisdom. Proverbs 31, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. Verse 26. Wisdom in speech doesn't appear suddenly. James actually teaches us that the most difficult thing that we can do is control our tongue. That if we can control our tongue, we can control our whole body as well. And Psalm 31 says that a woman, a godly woman, opens her mouth with wisdom. The ideas are formed within them before they're ever spoken into the world, to make sure that they're full of grace and truth and love and all the other characteristics that we're to hold. Peter likewise speaks in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 4 of the hidden person of the heart, which is precious in the sight of God. The world often celebrates what's loud, what's visible, what's outwardly impressive. The jewelry, the hair, the clothes, the car, the house. Sometimes it gets to things that are even more valuable and a lot less mundane than that. Sometimes we look at the home and the children and the spouse and all of those things, and we celebrate those, and that's great. But God continually points to what is inwardly formed and quietly held as being noteworthy and honorable. The hidden person of the heart, which is precious in the sight of God. Mary's treasuring is not presented as shallow sentimentality. That is the way many of us do things in this world. We just have this sentimental love or concern for things. That is not what is being presented here. It is a thoughtful, discerning reflection upon the work and the words of God. And Scripture is honoring that. It is honoring that as noble. Finally, Luke records the result of the circumstances. In verse 52, Jesus kept increasing in wisdom, in stature, in favor with God and men. So immediately after describing Mary as treasuring all of these things in her heart, Luke describes the growth of Jesus. I don't think that's by accident. The text moves from a woman carefully discerning and retaining what matters to her child increasing in wisdom, maturity, and favor before God and men. That progression shouldn't be ignored. Now, we got to be very careful when we talk about things like this. The text is not saying that Mary originated Christ's wisdom. Christ's wisdom was divine. It's not saying that Jesus wasn't divine, that he wasn't God, but Scripture does repeatedly present wise and faithful women as having a real and important influence on the lives around them. And that's what's going on here. The worthy woman of Proverbs is never portrayed as an ornament or as incidental to the story. She's very consequential and integral. Proverbs 31:11, the heart of her husband trusts in her. Trust like that is built upon reliability, on steadiness, on good judgment, and on wisdom. Consequential. In verse 27 of Proverbs 31, she watches over the ways of her household. She's attentive to the condition and the direction of those within her care. Consequential. Verse 28, her children rise up and call her blessed. Her influence becomes visible. Just like with Mary. She treasured these things in her hearts. And Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and men. Her children rise up and call her blessed. That influence becomes visible and it's appreciated by the lives around her. Consequential. Peter says of unbelieving husbands in 1 Peter 3:1 that they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. This is a remarkable statement, one that I have personally seen play out twice very closely. Scripture explicitly teaches that godly conduct, without a word accompanying it, just godly conduct alone, possesses transformative influence. Not manipulation, not domination, not forcefulness, but faithful conduct and a steady display of wisdom, transforming and winning over others. Reverence toward God lived consistently over time transforms the people who witness it. The world often recognizes only visible authority or public prominence or outward power, but the scriptures continually point toward another kind of influence, that influence of wisdom and faithfulness and presence that is held quietly and inwardly and is a measure of quality of character that is unable to be numbered. Many individuals stand stronger because somewhere near them was a woman who feared God, treasured what was right, and lived with wisdom. And often the full effect of that influence is neither seen nor understood until years later. Luke gives us only a brief picture from the early life of Jesus. The son in subjection within God's order, a mother carefully treasuring what God was doing around her, and a life increasing in wisdom, in maturity, and in favor. But through these simple things, and we just got three simple statements here in these two verses. Through these simple statements, Scripture quietly affirms truths that the world struggles to understand. That submission does not diminish. That thoughtward, inward faithfulness is a mark of wisdom. And that quiet influence of a godly woman leaves a real and lasting effect in the lives around her. God doesn't speak of these things lightly. He records them right here within the life of his own son, Emmanuel, God with us. When God was made flesh and dwelled among us, these things affected his life. What God chose to preserve in Scripture, he intends for us to see, for us to value, and for us to honor. So we need to ask ourselves a couple of questions. Do we understand God's order as he presents it? Or do we only view it as the world defines it? Because I think that's where we get ourselves in a lot of trouble. When we start making judgments about the value of things based upon the way the world defines them. Two, are we cultivating the kind of inward life that treasures what truly matters? And thirdly, what's being produced in the lives around us, the people that are shaped by our presence? What effect are we having on our spouse, on our children, on our neighbors, on our friends, on our coworkers? Scripture doesn't direct us to admire only what is big. It teaches us to recognize what is faithful. Whatever is faithful, God uses. God is able to use each one of us in the place that we are if we are willing to submit to Him. Doesn't matter what the role is. It doesn't matter what the place is. It doesn't matter what the circumstances is. It doesn't matter if anyone else in the world even knows it's going on. If I'm willing to submit to Him where I am, God can use me to affect people around me. We need to begin today to seek that kind of life. We had learned this from the Apostle Paul. We had learned this lesson from Peter or James, who was a pillar among the church in Jerusalem. We learned this from a young woman who simply sat back and listened and treasured and learned and did what she was given to do. And we are told in these verses that the life that she was willing to live impacted the life that changed the world. That in her household is where Jesus grew in wisdom. In her household is where Jesus grew in stature. In her household is where Jesus grew in favor with God and with men. You don't have to be something great. You have to be faithful. And God will use that to shape, inform, and transform the people around you. It is not because of my father that I have faith. It is because of my mother. And that I share in common with Timothy, who gained his faith from his mother and from his grandmother. And the truth of the matter is, that's the relationship that has the biggest impact on most of us. And it is why we even have an idiom that recognizes it: the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Appreciate the people around you. Appreciate the value of what they give. Determined to emulate it in your own life so that you can make a difference, however small or however big, so that when this life is over and the trumpet sounds and the graves open and you are raised to stand before the throne that we were studying about this morning in Bible class, that what you hear is, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." You notice he doesn't say, that was really big. He says, good and faithful. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Enter into the glories of your master. That's what we want for everyone. We want for everyone to hear those words. We want for everyone to be raised to glory. Well, the way that's going to happen is if we live in faithfulness. And if we can help in regard with those things,